Hey, hey, Chad, what's going on?
Oh, Jamie, it's a Tuesday night. Where else would I be?
That's true. That's true. Hanging in the basement.
Uh-huh, exactly.
That's what we do. That's what we do. Hey,
Uh-huh.
everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Paranormal Lens. I'm Jamie Widener. I'll be your host tonight, along with Chad Thomas, my co-host. For those who don't know, we are paranormal investigators with Jott-Nyx Paranormal, and we do this as an extension of the quest for things that are unknown, mysterious, paranormal, cool, fun, funky, all those wonderful things that are around us all the time. So thanks for joining us, and we hope to give you some information that you may not know about a place that you may not have ever heard of, but it was a key thing for us as a newfound country to build upon. So
And
before
it's
we
in our
get to that,
it's in our
before we get
backyard.
to it is almost literally in our backyard. Uh, Before we get to that, and Chad's repping his shirt. I got mine here somewhere. I forgot to put it on. So, oh well, at least we don't look like Twinkies. So,
Exactly.
although I'm dressed like a Twinkie, apparently. I was called something today I've never been called before.
What's that?
A ray of sunshine. Who knew?
It's true,
It could
yeah.
happen. So, how was your week, Chad? What's going on?
It's the kids have the theater show going on this week, so it's dress rehearsals and shows and stuff like that, and that means it's almost over. So, which is good and bad. So,
Yes, the joy of Tech Week is upon us.
mm-hmm.
Yes. So, no sleep till Sunday, and then
Yep.
all day. Yep.
Yep.
Been there how many times now? How many shows do you think this is now, combined between the kids?
It's got to be well over 20.
It's got to be. I think M has 15 or 16 alone.
Yeah. So,
And there's at least 5 or 10. I don't know.
yeah.
It's a good
Anyway,
problem to lose track here.
yep.
You know?
So yeah.
Okay.
So you ready to
Well,
get into it?
well, yeah, yes and no. So I wanted to say something though before we go, and this was something that struck me um, Sunday sometime in the afternoon. But for those of you who don't know, Chad and I live relatively close together, and there are the kids that we speak of cohabitate each of our houses. So there was and I'll jokingly say this, a prisoner transfer Friday. Um, and in that time, I said to Chad, standing in his doorway, "Hey, what are you doing tomorrow?" And he said, "Why?" As cautiously as he could. And I said, "Well, I'm going to go to Fort Mifflin and do a little wandering around and see what I can find there. Do you want to go along?" And it was almost an instant yes. So
Almost.
almost instant. It was pretty close to instant. So I want to say thanks again. I said this to you obviously the other day, but thanks for dropping anything you might have had planned and doing a little road trip. I think we had a fun day and hopefully share a lot of information with y'all here tonight, and some of the stuff we found. So
Mm-hmm.
I guess we should probably go into it, right?
Yep. Well, I do want to just going to shout out to Todd and Carmela here.
Yes.
I texted them on our way over there. Unfortunately, they were headed the other way, and they already had plans, or we would have met up. But
Yep.
next time we head out, and there will be a next time.
There will be definitely. Okay.
So anyway,
well, here we are. So tonight's episode is Fort Mifflin. And for those who don't know, Fort Mifflin is located on Mud Island along the Delaware River just south of Philadelphia. Essentially, it's at the end of the runway, one of the runways, the takeoff runways for Philadelphia International Airport. It is so close to the airport that you can see people's, the whites of their eyes as they look out the plane window at you as they fly over. So a little bit more on that in a minute. It was originally created as a British fortification to protect their successful and wealthy colony of Philadelphia. So meant to protect anything coming up the Delaware River from the ocean. And it's one of the last surviving Revolutionary War forts or battlefields. And this was interesting as I found it, but some consider it to be the second most haunted place in America. It makes you wonder what number one is. What do you think? I'll leave that to a poll, guys. Let me know what you think the most haunted place in America is. So a quick bit of history on the overview. It was originally known as Hog Island, as it was a muddy patch of land only fit for pigs. Commissioned in 1771 under the supervision of British Royal Engineer Captain John Montresor to protect the British colony of Philadelphia. It's designed as a star fort. As you can see here, it's not exactly a star, but it's pretty much in the series of it with the angled ramparts. And this was quite common at the time. Construction officially began in 1772, but due to lack of funds and resources, it was not completed until 1776. And at that time, it was under American supervision. Some believe that even Benjamin Franklin had a hand in this, in the completion of the oversight and the completion of the fort, although that's not exactly documented that I can find. So the key parts, the Revolutionary War, right? Here we go. So coupled with Fort Mercer, which is on the New Jersey side of the Delaware River, the forts made the passage up the river very difficult, as well as deadly for the Royal British Navy looking to reinforce British General Howe's army that was occupying Philadelphia. So keeping those ships and these dudes from getting north was the key parts of these two forts. That was their mission, their goal. The fort was key in holding off the British fleet from sailing to Philadelphia, New Jersey. The fort came under direct siege in 1777, and George Washington personally ordered that it be held to, quote, the last extremity to cover both the retreat of his army and the evacuation of the Continental Congress from Philadelphia. The defense of the fort allowed the Continental Army time to escape from their defeats at Germantown and Brandywine and make it safely to their winter camp at Valley Forge. Next slide. And this is Philadelphia again, showing the era. Philly was nowhere near what it is today, but it was still quite a big place. And then the Continental Congress made their way west, where they temporarily established the capital here in Columbia, PA, right where I am, or right around where I am, and also in York, PA. Excuse me. The siege used over 250 ships in total, and it took them 6 weeks, to finally capture the fort. The siege ended with a 6-day bombardment of the fort, where it was mostly reduced to rubble. Next slide. Over 200 men, next slide, I guess, actually. Over 200 men were there for the siege, and most died in the conflict. Those who survived evacuated the night of November 15th, and they set the fort on fire. The retreating troops left the fort's distinct multicolored flag flying, as it was not officially surrendered. Or this flag right here. Hashtag souvenir. So, given all of that, there was a lot of conflict and a lot of lives lost. So that's the first step in the history and the saga of what Fort Mifflin has. The next step, and going forward a few years, of course, but looking at the Civil War era, and from 1863 to 1865, Fort Mifflin was used as a military prison. And actually here, this picture, this is very common to see planes flying over the fort. There's even an Instagram hashtag, planes over the fort. And if you get a picture of a plane with the flag in the background or in the foreground, the plane in the background, they'll post it for you. I was not quick enough or smart enough to figure out how to take a picture of this plane. And if you were able to scroll in here really, really close, you will see that is actually Air Force One. So we noticed it was taxiing on the runway. We noticed it got really quiet in the skies. It's rather loud down there because of the planes and so forth. But have it going overhead, almost overhead of us, was really, really cool. And if I would have turned maybe 2 feet to my right, I would have rubbed it with the flag, and I could have made it on Instagram. But alas, not quick enough.
Next time, well, no.
Next time, right? Well, next time we don't know, but that was really cool to see Air Force One.
Yeah, it was.
So in 1794, the fort was rebuilt under the supervision of French architect Pierre L'Enfant, and it continued to serve as an active military post. If you'll note, L'Enfant was also the designer of the new American Capitol building, and L'Enfant Plaza is still existing in Washington today in his honor as well, which is the metro stop that I hop off all the time when I come in on the green belt and stroll through the city. So kind of cool. All right, back to the Civil War. In 1863, the fort was used as a military prison all the way through 1865. As many as 45 prisoners were crammed into cells sized around 50 to 80 feet in length. There was a lack of beds, and prisoners would lay on boards or the stone floor to sleep. It was chilly and wet while we were there, and we were standing in deep water many times, at least ankle deep. I can only imagine that was the same in that era, if not worse, because of the common architectural improvements that they've made. That yes, yeah, God, it was really cool. And then, Chad, can you imagine after what we did there on a, kind of a chilly but not freezing March day, what it would have been like there to be in the middle of the winter?
No, no.
Nah.
I'll pass.
The casemates, the larger areas have their own fireplaces, and we saw remnants of stoves in some of the smaller areas as well. But I can't imagine it would have been enough, and with enough natural resources around as well. Obviously, the airport wasn't there, so that would most likely have been wooded fields. But I can't imagine there was enough. And body heat alone would have been enough. So since the rations were sparse and the captives were then fed only pork, bread, and beef, no vegetables, go figure. The meat was often spoiled, but it was served anyway, as it would go. There were no bathrooms, so prisoners relieved themselves inside the cells. Here's a letter, a portion of a letter that was sent from a Confederate prisoner from 1864 that was published in the Cincinnati Enquirer. This is a quote. "The cell at this time is dripping with water from the arch over us. Even the sides are all wet. The soundest old man living could not remain in here without becoming injured in health, much less weakly old men, as many of us are. We have done nothing to deserve such punishment." I get that. We had water dripping, and just that. It was rough.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we did this actually now instead of like a bright sunny day in middle of August or something, because there were no bugs.
Well, it gave us an appreciation too of what they would have gone through. I mean, we can go back on a bright sunny day.
Oh yeah, and the other side of that too is the bright sunny day in the middle of August, it's humid as sin. You're right on the water, and insects are everywhere. So I don't know that you're ever going to get a good time to be captive there.
Right.
And that's the point as well. So throughout the Civil War, upwards of 56,000 prisoners died at the fort due to unsanitary conditions, overcrowding, and a lack of water. Many believe the inhumane way prisoners were treated prevented many who died from crossing over, and they still linger there today. After the Civil War, the fort was still in commission, but it was used sporadically. So since the Civil War until now, or more or less now, the fort became a National Historic Monument in 1915. In World War I, the fort was used as an ammunition depot, but was emptied in 1929 due to neighbors' concern for safety. What could be wrong with holding a bunch of bombs in your backyard, right? Yeah. In World War II, the fort housed munitions once again, as well as anti-aircraft guns to protect Philadelphia and the nearby Naval Ammunition Depot and the Philadelphia Naval Shipyards from potential enemy air attacks. Fort Mifflin, was officially decommissioned in 1954 after 183 years of service. In 1962, Fort Mifflin was deeded to the city of Philadelphia, which owns it today. And in 1970, the U.S. Department of Interior named it as a historical landmark. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers have a base next door, and they use the fort for training, still to this day. With that said, this makes Fort Mifflin the only active United States military base on home soil that predates the Declaration of Independence and the United States itself. The Army Corps of Engineers were instrumental in the restoration process, and given the age of the fort, there was a mishmash of buildings and fortifications from the 18th, 19th, and even the 20th century on the property. And you'll see that in the architecture as you stroll around, for sure. And even some of the clever things they did, such as building into the ramparts and such, to kind of hide some of the structures, especially the munitions depots. The fort is currently open to the public for tours, special events, historical reenactments, and of course, paranormal investigations. And more on that in a minute. So this is Paranormal Lens, right? So that's a history lesson.
Right.
But let's talk about the paranormal a little bit. So the hauntings. So here's what's been reported. Orbs everywhere. And I know how we both feel about orbs, so I'll leave it there. But orbs. Where's Dave when I need him with a can of Pledge? There are disembodied voices. A woman is heard screaming at all hours of the day and night. There are two versions of what this could be. Version number one, this is believed to be a Elizabeth Bunker, who was the wife of an officer on the base. Elizabeth suffered from gastritis, an excruciatingly painful intestinal condition, and ultimately died at the fort's hospital. The screaming is believed to be Elizabeth's suffering and cries for help and relief. The second version, also believed to be Elizabeth, this is Elizabeth Pratt. She, her husband, a U.S. Army sergeant, along with her son and daughter, lived in a shack inside the fort. The son died in 1802, and the daughter died of yellow fever in 1803. Elizabeth herself dies approximately 6 months later in 1803, also from yellow fever. The screams are believed to be those of a desperate mother who is tormented by the loss of her children. You can see that. While we might expect a more anguished sound, the screams have often been described as the sound of someone being murdered, which could be a result of the siege of the fort in 1777 as well.
Okay.
Other claims include partial and full apparitions of soldiers from all eras, disembodied voices, people peeking around corners and door frames, general sounds of activity like a bustle, people moving around, smells of baking bread or wood fires when there are no fires. People have been touched, shoved, and had hair pulled. And there's a story of the faceless man. And Jed, we have a little bit more to share with this. But let me read through it. So let's explore him. The faceless man is believed to be a soldier named William H. Howe. Howe was a Pennsylvania farmer who volunteered to join the Union Army during the Civil War. Howe became a superior marksman and was highly decorated for his skills. Howe contracted dysentery, as many did in the era, and there was no field hospital, he was sent home to recover and was bedridden for 2 full months. Considering he was gone so long, Howe's enrolling officer assumed he had deserted and came looking for him, but likely under dubious circumstances. It's reported that the officer and 3 other men arrived at Howe's home one night well after midnight, and they were likely drunk, causing a scene outside his home. To scare the men away, Howe fired 2 shots at the unruly group through a bedroom window. Unfortunately, both shots struck the enrolling officer and fatally wounded him. Howe was arrested and taken to Eastern State Penitentiary, awaiting trial. He attempted to escape from there, but was captured and then taken to Fort Mifflin for his actual trial. Howe was found guilty of desertion and murder and was sentenced to death by hanging. He appealed all the way to President Lincoln for mercy, but did not receive a reply in time to stay his execution. The stay did eventually come, too late. Since the Union Army was experiencing an issue with desertion at this time, many believed that Howe was made an example of as he did not return to his regiment in a timely manner. Again, being unwell, didn't have an opportunity. When Howe was hung, a bag was placed over his head, which is why his apparition appears to be faceless. There's another apparition that's seen on the fort called the lamplighter. This is an apparition of a man walking through the fort carrying an oil-burning lamp. This is largely in the areas of the officers' quarters and the barracks. There are no such lamps in the fort anymore, and this is possibly identified as a man named Joseph Adkins. There's another man that's seen called the tour guide, and this is in the area near the Powder magazine. There are reports of a person dressed in Revolutionary War era clothing. He is friendly, and many mistake him for Fort Mifflin employee, as he often offers details of the fort, takes questions, tells jokes, and is very sociable. He has also been found in photographs around this area. The catch is there is no such employee at the fort matching this description or this era. Interesting. There's a gentleman named Amos, who is a Revolutionary era war soldier who's seen cleaning his rifle near the artillery shed. A gentleman named Edward, who was a hospital caretaker who lived and died in the building in the 1800s. He is believed to be the cause of footsteps heard in the second-floor hallway and of desk drawers being opened when staff leave. The hospital is technically outside the fort, and because of that, it's an interesting location to begin with because it can be approached differently than the fort itself. And the offices for the fort are in there now as well. So it's an active building, even though it's not open to the public as the fort is. Speaking of being outside the fort, there is a sad-looking man. Is a solitary figure, has been seen walking along the road leading to the fort. He simply disappears into thin air when he reaches the gates. Interesting. The blacksmith. So there is a blacksmith shop on the fort. And inside the shop, the sound of hammers clanging on metal near the forge can still be heard, but it always stops when someone comes to investigate the source. The former blacksmith is believed to be a man named Jacob Sauer, and he and the commandant often disagreed upon whether the doors and windows to the shop should be open, largely because the commandant's office and home is directly behind, or in front of, I should say, the blacksmith shop. So I'm sure there was a lot of that noise coming right into his bedroom.
I'm sure, yeah.
But Jacob wanted them open, of course, because there's a lot of heat in there, and the commandant wanted them closed. And apparently, this argument is still ongoing as the doors and windows to the shop will randomly open on their own and sometimes forcibly.
Hmm.
We
I
did
mean,
not experience that when we were there because it was so freaking cold. Yeah,
yeah,
even with the forge on.
but I would I will say that that blacksmith shop is a really tiny blacksmith shop, and
Yes,
like you said, there was not a lot of windows or doors in it anyway, so I can
right.
imagine how hot that got during the middle
Absolutely.
of the summer.
Yes, completely agree with you there. Um, Other key areas that are active, the West Sallyport, which is behind the blacksmith shop and along one of the ramparts. Footsteps are reported when no one is moving, and a feeling that someone or something is rushing up to you as you stand still have been reported. We tried really hard to get into the West Sallyport, the West Sallyport.
Mm,
The problem was there was a good 3 feet of water on the ground in that area, as that is where well, first of all, um, the sluice gates, which help drain the fort, are crammed full of winter debris still heading out into the Delaware. And they know this, of course, but then it's really difficult to get it open, which is causing backflow of water around the moat, and then the moat's backlogging into the fort. None of it's able to drain out. So this is that low point. And unfortunately, I was standing along the back of the blacksmith shop trying to figure out how I could get in there, and I'm realizing that I'm now up to my calves in water already without moving into the deeper part. Um, there is, the rampart going around to it, and Chad is pulling it in like a mountain goat technique of trying to scale along the side to see if he can get there. And he starts sliding. I'm like, if you go, you're getting soaked. Like you're going in. Um, and that was not warm water, by the way. So
no.
we had to give up on that. But we will get back in next time, I promise. Um, the ramparts themselves are active. Many people were struck by random cannonballs and other projectiles while exposed in the open, kind of scouting where the enemy was, which leads to believe there's many spirits still there. And apparitions of Revolutionary War soldiers have been seen patrolling the ramparts across all areas of the fort. There are 10-foot walls around the entirety of the fort, the walls you see here. And on top of all of them is a grass area that is the technical rampart. So there is a walkway literally all the way around the place, which is really cool, and a fantastic view of some of the other areas as well, inside and out. There are these entity areas called casemates, and one of them is number 5. And in this one, women, particularly blondes, have reported feeling an uneasiness in this area. A 4th-grade student on a field trip captured an image of a Revolutionary War soldier. The image was not a staff member because the man was wearing a tri-cornered hat that is not part of the uniforms worn by reenactors. And sadly, as I searched for this image, I could not find it. So I believe the story, but I can't prove it to be true. And then there's Casemate 11. And this is an interesting area because it was lost through time and only rediscovered and excavated back in 2006. So it's a fairly new location on the property. Casemate 11 was originally a powder magazine and was used as solitary confinement during the Civil War. 2 men were known to have spent time here. The first is a gentleman named Bernard Devlin. Devlin was charged with murder and desertion. He is believed to have been captured via EVP and to have a deep Irish accent, which would make sense as Devlin is a fine Irish name.
Mm-hmm.
The second is William Howe, who we previously described. You want to get to that, sir?
Sure.
Okay. So we spent some time in casemate number 11. And I think, as crappy as the weather was, I was really surprised there were a lot of people around, at least in groups of people, kind of coming and going. And it's a self-guided tour, so you can wander at your risk and your pace. I say risk because you can't climb, try to scale into the Sallyport.
When we got there was a Boy Scout troop that had spent at least the morning there. And they were having lunch there. So there were a bunch of people there for the weather that it was. So
yeah, we came across another group of paranormal folks too as we were exiting the quartermaster store where you check in and pay up. They were catching the end of the paranormal information that we were getting from the staff who were there. So we'll talk about them in a second. But yeah, as the day went on, people kind of kept coming and going, but mostly leaving. And Chad and I, being the intrepid explorers that we are, we shouldered on. And we finally made our way over to casemate 11, and then went through another more than ankle deep area of water that was pulling in the first section of it to go to the back end. which was well above grade, so we were nice and dry for once. But um, the the area is, again, being solitary confinement, it is that. I mean, you're underground in these casemates, they're dug in, there's mounds above them, it's with
It
a
is
door on it,
dark.
where it's not, it's dark,
It's
there are
dank.
no lights.
Yeah.
It's, well, it's not a place you want to be. And that's, obviously why people get sent there for, what they've done, as far as being a good citizen in the prison. So we spent some time, probably a good 20-30 minutes in total, working through, trying to figure out if anyone or anything was with us. We set up a laser grid. We had a voice recorder running and a flashlight, and Chad was able to capture some video. And
Right.
this is part of that.
Well, before
Yep.
we do this, do we want to talk a little bit about Mary and her experience, because that sort of leads into this video?
Yeah, that's a good. Thank you, thank you. So Mary is 16 years, I believe, on staff,
Hmm.
and she met us in the quartermaster store along with Lisa, her coworker, who were there for the day. I'm joking to say they drew the short straw to be there on a cold November day, or March day, um, but they were fountains of information as far as what's
Hmm.
going on there. And um, Mary told us a great story of a time that she was a reenactor, and she is a reenactor, I should say, but when she was working and she was coming into casemate 11, which requires 3 steps down into the lower bowl where this water was for us to pass over. And as you know, she's wearing a hoop skirt and all the regala of a Revolutionary War woman, which is not cool. It's quite a lot.
Hmm.
Um, she said she felt on her right arm, which would have been the open area, again, not against the wall to her left. She felt an arm or hand, an icy cold hand, grab her by the side of her arm and help her down, guide her down those steps. She turned and there was no one there. So that leads into some of this. Chad, do you want any more to add to that?
No, I think we can go ahead and run the video.
Okay,
Oh,
cool. Here we are.
no, it'd help if I started from the beginning.
Coming in with a guest at one point. Someone helped her down these steps. You know, Mary. Okay.
Can you turn the flashlight off?
My question still is coming, so I appreciate that. You know, Mary. Turn the light off, please.
And you can hear the airplane. Like, we were underground and you can hear this airplane flying over.
And that's the way out. The only way out.
Are you the one that helps women and young children down these steps and in and out of this place? Is that you that helps people? Make sure they make it safe like everybody. It's very nice of you. It's very kind. I read a bit of the story of how you got here. And first of all, thank you for your service. You have quite a reputation as a marksman, even more so as a good person. And I'm sorry for what happened to you. I would defend my home the same way you did that evening, that night. And the rest of it is a bad rap for self-defense. We call now in our era self-defense. Please know that I respect you for who you are, what you did.
So yeah, we had about 15 minutes or 10 or 15 minutes of back and forth, and you had already established at this point that this was William, and you and some things like that. So my personal experience when we walked in here, like Jamie said, there you have to sort of step up over something, and it's not a big space. So I walked in and I sort of turned my back to the wall and I started backing up to give Jamie room to get in the room, and I've thought I had run into the wall because my backpack all of a sudden got lighter. I was carrying my camera bag, which is a backpack, and it felt like it got lighter, like I had run into the wall, and the wall was supporting it. And I turned around to look, and the wall was still 2 or 3 steps behind me. And I was like, "That was weird." And I think you were like, "What?" And I explained it, and you're like, you confirmed that I hadn't run into the wall.
Yeah, I mean, I did this. I looked behind, and there's there's at least a foot. So maybe not 2 steps, but at least 1 step back yet to the wall itself. And you did not move forward from where you were standing. You were standing still the whole time. So
Right.
I can't explain that either.
And we did ask William if that was him, and we did get a positive response with the flashlight.
Yep.
So we're just assuming that we're going with it that it was. It just I felt the mood of the room shift several times when we started asking different questions. Sort of like a revelation of, oh, you know who I am. I feel so much better. Like sort of that. I don't know. I forget how I explained it when we were there, Jamie, but it was definitely a change in mood.
Well, yeah, we're not doing the usual or who's here with us, and like the whole thing. Once you can identify and tighten it down to that, it saves a lot of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
First of all, and it cuts to the chase. We were lucky enough, I think. I say luck because you never know what you're going to get when you do these investigations, or and this was a pop-up one at that. We were lucky enough to get direct responses via that flashlight. I don't think we had to wait more than 10 or 15 seconds for anything. And it was an off upon request as well. So there's seemingly something with some intelligence there. That is at least claiming to be William Howell,
right?
And that's obviously always subject to whether it would be or not. But it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was definitely. We definitely had that experience. I thought I saw something on the one rampart. It was one of those out of the corner of my eyes. I looked at, I'm like, Jamie, was there something up there? And I discounted it, and you're like, you shouldn't discount it because that's what happens here. And
that's a claim, right?
It was definitely interesting. So I want to jump back to Mary a little bit. Mary was a fountain of youth, and she was so humble.
Yeah.
There have been a lot of investigations at Fort Mifflin. Portals to Hell, Katrina Wiseman was there. And we were talking to Mary, and she explained this whole story to us about, being helped down. And not once did she say, oh, and I told Katrina, like, nothing at all about that. Like she was the center of that segment, and like not one mention of that at all. It was just to have somebody so humble who loves what they do and appreciates her unseen coworkers, because that's how she describes she describes these spirits as they're her unseen coworkers. And
Absolutely.
she and Lisa were great. We could have spent an hour talking to them. I think
we did, actually. Between the start and the finish, we probably did.
Right.
Yeah. So if you're interested at all, Portals to Hell, season 3, episode 6 is Fort Mifflin, and there's a lot of cool stuff in that. Not a lot of actual investigative capture, but they brought in a medium, and I'm drawing a total blank on his name, who has quite a few interesting experiences backing up the claims, so that the general claims of the fort, and also Mary has quite a. She is dressed in her reenactor garb, in quite a prevalent position in the beginning of the episode and throughout. So,
and I believe I saw it a long time ago, but I think you mentioned recently too that they actually had access to the hospital to investigate.
Yes. Yeah, they did.
And whereas most people don't get that access.
That's correct, and it's largely because it's the offices, and there's just it's in not as good a shape, even though most of these buildings are not in that great a shape to begin with. It's in lesser shape in certain areas, so they just don't want folks coming through and helping to deteriorate the condition.
So Todd asked how long did we spend there? We got there
right at 11, and I think we left a little after 2, so about 3 hours, pretty much straight through.
Mm-hmm. Maybe a little longer, because you kept saying, "Are you good? Do we have to leave yet?"
Yeah, Chad was chauffeuring later in the evening. one of the nieces along and to a thing. So we had to get back by a certain time, and I'm trying to be mindful, but I don't really want to go either. So
Right.
we made it back in time. So
Right.
yeah, but about 3.5 hours, perhaps somewhere in there. Almost as much time as a normal investigation, like some of the drop-ins they do, which we'll get to that. But
Right.
there's certainly ways to investigate this fort.
Bert, I want to say a lot of these old forts have great energy. So yeah, definitely.
These old properties, absolutely. So let me finish going through the active areas, and we'll get to some of the other stuff. So the last thing I want to share with you is also the commandant's quarters, which is pretty much in the middle of the fort. It's this large building. It was originally created as a citadel to be the last place for defense should the fort be breached and the hostiles are coming in. Interestingly, it was created as an into the house that became where the commandant of the fort lived. It had a really cool, and I didn't get a chance we didn't really get a chance to get around it, but there is a 4-sided chimney and fireplace in that building as well, which is really interesting. You don't see many of those. Just show the scale of the building as well. And there's another double-sided fireplace on the other side of the building. So I'm imagining, and it's down to the walls. There's not much left. I'm imagining it was pretty here when fully ornated and decorated of the era. But here, the presence of a young child has been felt here. The presence of a young child has been felt here by several psychic mediums visiting the fort, and the sound of young girls giggling and calling mommy have been heard. Additionally, the sound of barking dogs has been reported in this area. A Fort Mifflin tour guide with no interest or belief in the paranormal has reported having his pants tugged while standing between the commandant's house and the blacksmith's shop when giving a tour. When he turned to respond, there was no one there. So, again, it could be a child. So that's the active areas. To kind of put a bow on all of this, I'd say given the length of service and the traumatic history, it's hard for me to believe that there's not paranormal activity at Fort Mifflin. For some, the paranormal claims here, they may have some normal conclusions. Some of the stuff, I'll try to maybe throw some cold water on some of the excitement of it. But given the fort's proximity to the Delaware River, we heard the cries of seagulls while we were walking around near the commandant's house and in the middle of the parade grounds. In the case of the screaming woman, the sound of seagulls could be mistaken for a human scream, especially given that they are not common birds, as we found, because there are a lot of hawks and eagles and other predatory birds there that capture and eat them. So perhaps we were lucky that day to find that there were seagulls. We found that most areas have older conduit for electrical lines running through them for the lighting that they have in the casemates and the cells. As we were kind of poking at that with some of our equipment, we found that there were higher levels of EMF, and especially where the conduit connects to the lighting boxes, which are really old as well. So, and I think safe to say that exposure to elevated levels of EMF can cause fatigue, disorientation, concentration difficulty, and even hallucinations. Some are more sensitive to the effects of EMF than others. So, not saying that someone didn't see something, but there is perhaps some rational explanation depending on where they were. My thought to kind of wrap this up is that I chose this topic because Fort Mifflin intrigued me, but I have never been there. The research showed so much history that it isn't credited enough, and a lot of sacrifice from those who were there, both willingly or not. Between the Civil War and the hold of the fort to allow our Continental Army time to escape, and then of course the prisoners and those who were there during the Civil War era. The research led to a trip, which led me to wanting to go back as soon as possible to investigate more.
You were already talking to the paranormal guy.
So we also got to meet Greg O'Brien on the way out near the end of our time, and Greg leads the paranormal tours there. And of course, we gave our business cards or Jott-Nyx cards to the staff, and then an extra one, which turned out to be for Greg. As we were chatting with him, he was explaining that there was a team coming in that night still to have an overnight. It was barely 45 at the time we were there during the daylight. And
we could see the water
and all that water and intermittent drizzle, and it was going to rain more that night, and it poured on our way home. So I imagine that rain came over them. I'm like, those poor people. But investigators investigate. So I also want to note, and it struck me today. I was talking to some of my coworkers who are interested in what we do, and I explained that we were there, and I showed a picture of Air Force One, and it struck me that if the fort didn't hold, okay, and the British Army was able to be reinforced in Philadelphia, and with the Continental Army already on the run from their defeats at Brandywine and other places, then Air Force One might not have been flying over the fort that day. We could have a totally different outcome. And that was kind of cool. So a little bit of nostalgic history thought process there for me as that kind of sunk in today. I do want to say, and we already touched on this, but I want to say a special thanks to Mary and Lisa, who shared their personal experiences with us, as well as gave us a lot of information about the activity of the fort. It was not just about paranormal stuff; it was about the history of the fort too. So these ladies are all in on being there. It's not just a job; it's an experience for them. They do have a paranormal program. It's pretty robust. It offers private investigations, open investigation evenings. There is a group setting aimed at beginner and novice investigators, so you don't have to be seasoned and have a bag full of equipment to show up. Ted, you and I both know the best tool in your toolbox is you, right?
Yep.
So there are candlelight tours in the fall. They're usually in October, and there are opportunities to sleep with the ghosts. And this starts with a guided tour. Then paranormal techniques are taught in a workshop before an overnight investigation begins. So, and here's links to the fort's website and some of their other means to connect to them. If you are at all in the Philadelphia area, or the tri-state area, as we call it, between New Jersey and Delaware and Pennsylvania, I highly, highly, highly recommend getting here if you have not been. You will deal with people if you go during the day, but there are times when you're left alone, like we were in Casemate 11, and we would have probably stayed longer. But one guy that was still there showed up. And then we're like, hey, and he kind of stood there for a second. I'm like, he was checking out our stuff, and we're going like, okay, I guess we're going to go. We probably would stay a lot longer and figured out some more stuff. But if you get a chance, this is well worth it. It's a $12 adult admission to go in during the day. Of course, there's more costs for paranormal stuff, but different costs, I should say. But I can't wait to go back, Chad. I really can. I am so happy that we got a chance to get down there. It's possibly my favorite place.
Right. So I'm going to push a little bit of the fundraising for them because, unfortunately, it is a very, very rundown place. Actually, Todd made a comment earlier that they have a fundraiser to help with recent storm damage. One of the roofs had blown off one of the
officers' barracks.
The officers' quarters. It's been so cold and miserable. It's still laying behind the officers' quarters.
Yeah, it's out in the moat as well.
Right. The property is owned by the city of Philadelphia, but it's sort of the redheaded stepchild. It's sort of out there, and nobody remembers it's there. There just isn't a lot of funding for it, so they're sort of almost self-sufficient. Mary explained to us that the Army Corps of Engineers actually pays the utility bills and then bills the city back. There's been issues with a water main break. The Army Corps of Engineers did a temporary patch for them several years ago, and they're figuring out who's going to pay to have the right patch, the
actual fix done. Yeah, the patch is still in place.
Things like that. So it's one of those that they need as many people getting there as possible. So spread the word. The QR code that's up, if you feel like making a donation to them, that goes directly to their projects, helping the restoration. As beautiful as the Commandant's quarters must have been, it's like you said, it's just a shell of a building right now. And
holes in the roof. Yep.
And I don't know if you remember, but I had some strange feelings in there. Like, did I have to sit down? I can't remember, but it was like
you did not. But you were commenting that you're feeling lightheaded and uneasy.
Mm-hmm. So there's definitely things there. The paranormal energy there is definitely amazing. Yeah. It's full. So I'm with you. There's things that probably aren't paranormal, but I think there's plenty of paranormal there to be had. Um,
Yeah.
you've got airplanes flying over, so some of those noises,
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, and
but yeah,
a lot of the casemates that are along the walls, and going back through the images, you can see like this looks like block windows almost. These small openings are prevalent in casemates 1 through 5, and it just allows for outside sounds to come in. It's just another kind of a funnel for anything. It could be a car out in the parking lot, which is a good bit away, but it's reasonable to say. It could be people walking, talking. There's a lot of sounds that could bleed in. The good news is that the fort is so kind of out there on the edge of anything that the only real big sounds are the airport. The planes coming and going, but there are boats on the river. Right next to a dock. The original old docks for the fort are kind of still there, although there was a huge ship there. I have no idea what that thing did, but it was really cool. The Coast Guard has a presence nearby at that dock as well. So the cutter was out while we were there. So like the sounds of like ships coming and going. It is a. I didn't include it here because it could be a lot of other things, but there is the report that there are the sounds of ships docking and so forth as well. But again, if you're inside the casemates and you're hearing this, like a ship horn, it could literally be a real boat.
right.
The river is highly active all the time. It's just downriver from the shipyard, the naval shipyard, and then just upriver a little bit from the refineries. So, there was somebody out on a personal boat while we were there too, just buzzing up the river. So.
Right.
A lot of stuff that can be happening, but
Yeah.
I think there's enough there to say, I'm going to ask you, the question we always at the end of this is, paranormal or not, or haunted or not. What do you say?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I think it is. Yeah, I mean, we both had experiences there. Talking to Mary and Lisa, they both have had experiences there. People who don't believe in it I think there's no question that there's paranormal activity there. So.
I completely agree.
One of the history things that I found that sort of blew my mind that you didn't touch on is there's a torpedo casement there.
Yes, there is.
And you want to explain that a little bit? I mean, we didn't get a picture of that, but that blew my mind.
That's probably the darkest place in the fort too, right? So, the casemates are kind of dug into the ramparts, and the torpedo casemate is a hole in the floor that goes. We're at sea level basically there, so it doesn't go very deep, but it's water filled, and they created a tunnel leaving the fort and going out into the river. And they're talking the 1700s or so, and torpedoes existed, but they were incredibly primitive to what they are now. And somebody would be on the rampart communicating to somebody at the door or the entry area, who would be communicating with the team, the two people that would have the torpedoes, and they would start it and drop it into the water, and it would go through the tube and tunnel and exit out into the river in hopes that it would hit whatever was coming by. So, if you've ever done any target practice of any kind, it's hard enough to hit a stable target, much less a moving target with a river current, with a device that has no steering. So, and it's just
minimal propulsion.
Yeah, and very limited propulsion. So I can't see this being extraordinarily successful practice, but it was part of the defense of the fort. And I'm assuming when there's 250 British Royal Navy ships, anchored off the edge of the fort there in the river, it probably had to hit something. But just what and how and what kind of damage it caused, I couldn't say. Yeah. I found it more fascinating, Chad, and I think we saw this as we were going through the exhibit rooms. They submerged these basic boxes that looked like boxes, 50 by 80 feet boxes or so that had they filled with stones and laden with spikes angled up so that they were drafted high, and the river's shallow, fairly shallow anyway, and these spikes were angled enough that they would capture the hull of a ship and gouge it and therefore start the process of sinking it. And these things were anchored into the riverbed at several different places along between Mercer and Mifflin. And that is part of the process of protecting the city of Philadelphia as well. The ships of the American Navy, which really wasn't a Navy yet, but the ships that were used, the boats that were used to help as well in the raids against the British were shallow draft boats, versus the seafaring ships that the British were bringing over from England. So
Mhm.
they had huge advantages as far as the tactical maneuvering of their boats versus the steerage that these large vessel ships had to have. These multi-mast ships had to have. They were outgunned by a lot. There's no joke about that. But these boats helped to harass the Navy and help delay the progress coming up the river, along with the boxes, along with the cannons that the forts had. It was just enough to allow us to get where we needed to be for the winter, regroup, reconfigure, and come out swinging come the spring. And then we all know what happened from there. So,
Right.
Sorry to any British friends who are out there listening, but we kicked your ass. So,
So yeah, definitely an experience that you should, if you're in Philadelphia, apparently it's a nice place to go have a picnic. There's a little park where there's picnic tables and stuff.
absolutely.
Take your bug spray. As Tim said, take your bug spray with you.
And just for the record, Greg told us, the paranormal director, Greg O'Brien, told us that they are booked with paranormal investigations through June at this point. So it's a July-August window. So it's going to be bug season no matter what. So,
or September.
Wait a while.
Yeah.
But there's still investigations available through the rest of the year as well. That's good news. That means we should get booked in there, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So, okay.
And it's one of those places I think you could take a decent sized team and spread out and not interfere with each other.
Yeah, especially with the unique isolation of the building and the casemates. But the buildings are spread out pretty well as well. I think, yes, I agree completely.
Mm-hmm.
You could have a large team there and all be separated enough.
I think
we got one. We got one. Well, two. I'm sure Bert goes, Heather goes. So, yes. And honestly, guys, I was thinking about this, Bert and Heather, your unique skill sets, your sensitivities, I would think would be a huge asset at this location as well.
Yep.
I kept thinking, I didn't see anyone from Staticom, Ron or Lourdes or Tony with us tonight. But I kept thinking of that too. Like, in case we were standing at Casemate 11, how much I would love to have Staticom there, to really enhance and pick up on the true activity of that space, because we knew we were getting something. And the disadvantage there, Chad, and I think we didn't note this earlier. There is some kind of electrical transformer when you first come in mounted to the wall, and it left a steady hum through the entire time we were there, which we got used to it pretty quickly because it's just white noise-ish sound, but it definitely impacted the quality of our audio for the voice recorder we have running. And it's always challenging anyway with a voice recorder, where Staticom would certainly be the huge asset in that area. So, Ron and Lourdes, whenever you catch up to this, we got to do this, guys. So, please.
So, that was something else we had to happen in there. Remember, we heard it on top of that white noise at a different pitch. We heard like a mumbling. I heard it, and then you heard it a little bit later.
It was just like a deep voice just talking softly, mush mouth kind of thing happening. You heard it first. I didn't hear it with you, but then we both heard it together a few minutes later.
Yep.
Absolutely.
We also had the step creak on us.
Yes. Man.
I'm glad I went along, Jamie.
Glad you went. Well, I'm going to say this, guys, and I'm apparently the world's worst paranormal investigator. So I knew I was going there, and I had some kids to drop off at play practice and some other stuff to do that morning, and I totally ran out of the house because we were late and left my bag behind. So I had no equipment with me other than my phone. And again, you're your own best instrument. So hey, at least I had me. But Chad comes bouncing out of the house with his backpack and all his stuff, and I was like, yes. So, hero of the day.
So, I mean, but it was a good experience. I'm glad you took me along. I'm glad you mentioned it, because I would have sat at home and done nothing.
So, teamwork makes the dream work. Right?
Yep.
So, that's what I got. It was a lot, and it is a lot. And we didn't get into the West Sallyport area at all, so there's certainly more to come that
And
we haven't experienced. So
and that was two of us, and we really only investigated for 20 minutes. We didn't
intentionally
investigate.
investigated, yes,
Right.
yes,
So I can, several team. It's gonna, whenever we go, it's gonna be a great experience, and we'll have a decent team, and yeah, it'll be a lot of fun.
absolutely, cool. All right, challenge accepted.
Jamie's gonna line it up. You heard it here.
Yep, we'll figure this one out.
So all right. Should we jump into what's going on with
Yeah,
the
let's
team?
let's put a bow on it and wrap it up.
All right. March 30th is coming up quickly. I mean, not soon enough at this point, but I was just saying to Melissa today, the problem with doing this once a month thing is we don't see each other. Like you and I do, but the rest of the team we don't get to see. So
yes, exactly.
So
Yeah.
March 30th, I think they're down to like 10 tickets for that day. So if you want to join us,
Still a few, but not many. So.
Yep.
Hey, Greg. Thanks for joining us.
So, the rest of the public investigations there, out of Red Mill, and hopefully sometime we'll see, Fort Mifflin on this list, Jamie.
Yes, that's right. It's going to happen.
Yep. Upcoming shows next week. I'm going to, I'm trying to think of a good pun here, but I can't. Telekinesis. And then we're going to see double the next week with doppelgangers.
Well done, sir.
And then
you're saving that, weren't you?
It just came to mind. So then I'm going to dig into another local. This one's truly local to us, Rockford Plantation, which there's a lot of history there. Again, Revolutionary era, pre-revolution, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
So that'll be interesting. And then April 9th, Jamie will not be with us, but I'm going to have Steve Dills as a co-host that night. And he's going to bring on one of his lead investigators at the Hanover Tavern. And we're going to talk about that space, which is in Virginia, Hanover, Virginia. It's a great building. Hopefully you'll be able to see part of the episode, Jamie, because it's a great, it'll be fun to investigate it there sometime.
9:00 that night will be fireworks time where I'm at, so I don't know.
True.
I will try. I'm going to log in and ask all kinds of questions. Like,
so, and then here's our socials. The typical stuff. But yeah, it was a great trip. That's all I can say.
Yeah, yeah. I can't. I'm still. We're 3 days out from being there, and I'm still thinking about it regularly.
Mm-hmm.
And that for I know we've all been places, right? I get it. We've had places that have left an impact on us before. It's been a while for me though to have a place that I felt this connected to and intrigued by and drawn to. As the even the short window, the 3-ish hours we were there, just a short amount of time. I'm very looking forward to getting back and being able to do more. Even just to visit. I mean, there's still so much history. The founding of our country was greatly supported by the efforts of the people defending this fort and the energies and efforts and the lives that were lost. So pretty cool. So it's just, and it's my own history geek coming out of me. I'm sorry. Growing up in a colonial era river town here in South Central PA, this kind of stuff, it just draws me. So
yeah.
Great work that everyone is doing there as well. So, thanks to all of the staff and the volunteers. We didn't even get to see the reenactments and such, the really cool stuff. So
right.
We had a great time though and felt very welcomed.
And I would love to know if they do like a cleanup day or anything like that, because I'd be interested in going and helping out. So,
well, if you get your waders out, you can dig into the sluice gates. So,
well, it sounded like they were getting some professional help with that one from what I think Greg was saying that as at the end.
Good. I caught something.
So
I could see us out there just digging around in it.
We are not the professional help they need.
Yeah, they were not the help they need for that anyway. Other stuff.
So well,
definitely willing and able.
Yeah. And Todd, thank you for your comment there.
Thank you.
we appreciate that people notice, because there is a lot of work that goes into it. So, but we love
appreciate you showing up,
Yeah.
on a regular basis too. That means a lot to us. That we're not just talking to each other. And we literally, first episode way back when, we thought we were just going to be sitting here talking to each other. But
So
we're very grateful for all y'all for showing up and joining in and chiming in as well. It means a lot to us. Thank you.
Oh, April 6th.
Oh, hey.
So
Ooh. I don't
yeah,
know.
that's not a good day for either of us.
Oh, geez. I'm on a plane, Greg. I'm sorry. Heading to Florida that day.
No, you're not. You're on the
Wait,
plane
no,
the
it's the
next
next
day.
day. It's the next day. I'm packing that day. I got 2 kids to pack. I will see what I can do though. Okay.
Yeah,
Greg, I'm going to ask quick if that's going to be posted anywhere visibly so we can plan it out. Website perhaps, or Facebook.
So I'm celebrating my dad's 80th birthday that day, so I will not
It's a
be
big
there.
day.
Yeah. So, but I will find another time we can go help them.
Absolutely. But everybody else, there you go. April 6th. Be there, be square.
So, all right. Well, if we don't see a comment from Greg here, we will post it somewhere. We'll
get
post
that
it
after.
in the notes if we find
There it is.
something.
Post it on Facebook. Okay.
All right. So
Awesome. Thank you, Greg. Appreciate you.
So yeah, we'll definitely be seeing Greg in the future. We're going to get that set up. So
Absolutely.
But on that note, we want to say thank you to everybody who watched. Thanks for joining us. Jamie's got a souvenir flag.
Yeah. It's the coolest flag ever. I mean, not as cool as our flag, but that's pretty cool.
So
put it back up here in the little stand.
Other than that, I guess we will see you next week, right, Jamie?
Yes, sir. Be there, be square. It's a date. Tuesday
All
night.
right. All right. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Good night, all. Take care. Good week.